Dear God, I know I'm supposed to be thankful in all things, in all the seasons, through trials and tribulations, in good times and bad, but here I am in the middle of it, sad and overwhelmed. The world as I knew it is gone. People I love are suffering. The life I walked through is suddenly no more. I can't gather around a table and celebrate family. I can't hold hands with those I care about. Instead, grief and despair seem to be eager dinner guests. God, I don't feel like celebrating. But I sit at my table and I close my eyes, listening for that still small voice, the one that always manages to rise above all the noise of this life. I hear you. Above the sadness, above the fear, above the bewilderment of all that has happened this year. There you are, whispering, "Be still, and know that I am God." And I close my eyes, and I take a deep breath, and I find my thankfulness in a God who is still in control. Amen.
Well, good morning. Brewster, welcome. Special pastor appreciation to our children's director in Brewster, Tiffany, and her lovely assistant, her husband, K-Dub. Thank you guys for leading well there. If you're online and tuning in, thanks for doing that, and thanks for showing up on this beautiful morning here in Chelan. We're starting a brand new series called Grateful Anyway, and we just wanted to explore themes of thankfulness and gratefulness through November, and we decided that we would talk about how is it that you can be grateful or thankful even in the midst of some kind of pain or loss, and what's the process, or is there a process to get through a breakthrough to hope in the middle of that? Listen, this is going to be rough. It's okay. I'm going to cry, and I'm okay, all right? And you'll see why down the road, why the tears are more than good for me. We're all in different places. Some of you are right in the middle of a time of loss and grief, and maybe you've been in it for not just months, but years, and you're going to like, Kyle, I know exactly what you're saying. Another segment of us are like, no offense, but like, oh man, Kyle, you talking about this again? Like, haven't we moved past that? Shouldn't you be better by now? I get that. You've never been through anything, grief and loss. I was you about 16 months ago, all right? But then there's a bunch of us who are friends with people who are in the middle of grief and loss and hurt. And I hope there's something for all of us here. Shoot. I cried all week, so I thought I'd be okay. This is my brother. I don't have enough time to talk about him. I really don't. All you need to understand, if you know me, you already knew this. He was the bestest of friends I could have. He was my biggest cheerleader. He's a year older than me in school. And we have been through a lot together. I told Graham a couple weeks before my brother died in July, a year ago, July. I told Graham that because my brother he struggled with diabetes and he should have taken better care of it, and his kidney shut down. But I didn't think he was going to die very soon. I knew that he wasn't super healthy. And relationally and mentally, we were really good. But I said to Graham a few weeks before he died, shockingly, I said, hey, listen, I'm going to get a call someday that my brother's dead. I won't be surprised, but I'll be devastated. Wow, man, I was right. I don't get a lot of predictions right. I was right. I didn't know how devastating it was going to be. And some of you know how that feels. And it's been a very, very difficult journey. I want to share some of those lessons. And like I said earlier in our service here in Chelan, I'm just going to share where I've been and what I've learned. A few weeks after he died, I started just writing down stuff. Not writing down, but in my notes app on my phone, I just started putting in stuff. When I think stuff, feel stuff, hear stuff, I write it down. And I thought, I don't know how I'm going to do that, but it feels healthy to kind of, since I wasn't talking to anybody, to get some of my thoughts and feelings down. Then I thought, well, someday maybe it'll be useful for somebody. So that's what you're going to get today. I took it all, kind of organized it, tried to make it sound like a sermon, but it's more just a conversation. And I'm not saying this is where you should go or this is how you should handle grief. I'm not saying if you run into pain, you should do it the way I've done it. I'm just saying this is where I've been and laying out a plan for the rest of the month in this series of how we process pain, disappointment, loss, and grief and move in a direction towards hope. The Bible word that we use for that is lament. I don't like this word. I've never liked this word. I think it's a word seminarian people use and people who are better Christians than me use. Until the last few months, I ran into a book called Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy. And man, I'm so thankful for lament. And we're going to share that with you in the next few weeks. Lament is a prayer in pain that leads to trust. And modern Christianity is so quick to move us along with pain. Like, okay, yeah, but God's still good. God's still on the throne. You should be thankful for what you got. Now let's just keep moving. Yeah, but we don't grieve as people who have no hope. Yeah, but we grieve. And hurrying that process was never a biblical thought. In fact, lament is a long process that moves us towards hope. Lament, when life hurts, lament, the process of sharing your grief journey, teaches us how to talk to God through our pain instead of walking away from Him. And a lot of us have done that. You've done that. Some of you listening, the reason you're not here is because something happened and you couldn't understand why God would allow that to happen. And you said, I'm out of here. I understand. The author of Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy says that lament is how you live. It's how we live between the poles of a hard life and trusting God's sovereignty. Like something horrible happened over here, and I know that God is in control over here. But this journey right in here, that's what we call lament. And we're going to give you the steps and journey through that together in the next few weeks. Here's where I am in my personal grief journey. Grief is, again, this is just me talking. Grief is the pain we feel when someone or something we love is gone. I never felt that until my brother died. I've gone through some painful things and I've lost a friend or two along the way, but never to the extent of this. So I knew that grief was this feeling because my brother was gone, but it's also a process where you got to live with that loss and keep moving forward. And that's what I couldn't figure out how to do. And it wasn't for a lack of faith. It wasn't because I wasn't praying. It wasn't because I wasn't reading my Bible. I just got so stuck. And some days still am stuck. Let me tell you some thoughts about grief. If you've been through grief and a serious loss, and many, many, many of you have, worse than me, of course, you've been through a lot. I'm surrounded by friends and family who are grieving and been through lots of stuff also. So the stuff I'm going to share, I think a lot of you are going to say, you're right. If you've never been through anything yet, I want to teach you about grief. I wish someone, or I was listening about grief and how to help people in grief before I experienced it. Here's some thoughts I wrote down in my notes app. Grief is a bully. It just moves in and takes over, uninvited. It doesn't knock. It kicks open the door to your soul and says, here I am. It's an uninvited guest that will not leave. I couldn't say, hey, Bill, grief. Well, look at the time. I got to get up and early tomorrow, so I'm headed to bed, and he's like, I don't care, I'm staying. And what I found, and this may just be me, what I found is in the middle of this process, this bully of grief made the good feelings in my life muted and the bad feelings amplified. Like when I experienced something wonderful, it was so numb that I couldn't really feel it. And then bad feelings, like a certain, maybe it's an argument with my wife, or a disappointment at work, or something wasn't going right at home, or whatever. Man, that just got amplified. Whereas months before my brother died, it was just like, yeah, that's no big deal. But grief just made it so huge. I remember my brother died mid-July. I stayed in Idaho a couple weeks ahead of the funeral. We got back 1st of August, and Darlene, she's the best. We go down to Fred Meyer. We had just gotten back, and we go down to Fred Meyer, Wenatchee. And we walk into Fred Meyer, and I said, hey, I need some stuff in the hardware department. She says, okay, I'm going to produce. And I'm like, okay. And she left to go to produce, and I went to hardware. And as I started to walk, I got super scared because she wasn't with me. That's weird, huh? Like, for 2 weeks, she'd been right with me, and then it's like, what do I do now? I'm all by myself. That's grief. And it's a bully. Grief also confuses your friends. People show up early, and then there's silence. Like, people show up to share. Next slide, please. People show up to share and say that they're sorry. What do you need? That's such a hard question, isn't it? I don't know what I need. So all my friends they showed up early, and then as a month or 2 or 6 months went by, everyone quit asking. And I get that. I understand that. Like, they don't want to upset you. They don't want to make you cry. Like, Kyle's always crying anyway. We don't want to make him, okay. But like my close circle of friends, and they're still my circle of friends, they didn't know what to do, so they didn't do anything. And it's not their fault. I'm not blaming. I did get angry at them. They don't know that. My wife knows it. But like, I thought, I've spent 60 years of Christmases and Thanksgivings and birthdays with my brother, and now here's one without him, and nobody cares. Again, grief is a bully. But that's how I felt. So then, down the road a few months, after I started talking about it, I'll tell you that in just a second, I had some of my friends say, well, you never said you needed help. And I'm like, I was drowning. I couldn't speak. We're like, if you needed something, you should have said something. In the middle of grief, as it's pulling you under, there's nothing, I didn't know what to say. I was incapable of saying help. I would sit in my recliner at home. I get up early, I'm up 2 hours before Darlene, and do my quiet time and meet with Jesus and everything. And kind of, for most of the months after this, going through the routine of doing that. And I would just sit there and think, I am not okay. And nobody knows it. So the obvious thing is, why don't you tell somebody? I ain't telling anybody. Because I'm drowning. And I can't save myself. Grief is best expressed through tears. I'll share more of that in just a second. I read this quote that says, in some mysterious way, our inner communication system knows its verbal limitations. Like, and I didn't have the words, so instead of words, the tears come. It's taken me a long time to know that tears aren't weakness. They're truth escaping the body. And I know, listen, I'm uncomfortable crying in front of y'all also, even though I cry all the time. I cry when Boise State loses, and I cry at Hallmark commercials. It doesn't matter. I'm a crier. Do whatever you want to do that with. But here's what I'm learning. To cry is human, but to lament is Christian. Like, just to cry tears, it's okay to feel sorrow. But I wanted and needed a process to my sorrow. I needed a pathway from my sorrow, and I didn't have it. Grief seems selfish. Like I would sit at home and I think, I don't want to go into the office today. I don't want to get a sermon ready. I don't want to talk to y'all. I don't want to pretend out on the sidewalk that I'm greeting you and everything's fine. But I did. The problem with grief is you have to look at yourself. You have to be selfish to a point. Because healing demands that you slow down and you look inward. And that looks selfish to people who don't understand grief. I get that. One of my pastor buddies lost his mom, and he wrote a little article about it. And he said that buried, unprocessed grief grows, and it rarely grows anything healthy. You've heard me say this before about pain. I stuff grief down, and we think, okay, as long as I'm not crying and it's not getting in the way, I'm just going to stuff it down. And we think we get rid of grief, but it goes into the basement of our soul and starts working out and pumping iron, and it grows and gets bigger and more powerful. Grief support comes in random ways. This is super random. A couple weeks after I got home from my brother's funeral, my oldest daughter, the therapist, sent me a text and said, hey, I just stumbled onto this podcast. It's about grief. I think you should listen to it. So I thought, okay, I'll listen to it. I listen to podcasts when I jog or mow my yard. So I said, yeah, I'll listen to it. Well, it was a podcast called All There Is. Anderson Cooper is the host. Anderson Cooper, I found out, listening to the first podcast, Anderson Cooper's mom died, Gloria Vanderbilt, later, she was in her 80s or 90s or whatever, about 3 years ago. As Anderson Cooper went to clear out her apartment, he was overcome with grief, paralyzed from performing or doing anything, and couldn't get moving in life. Because as he cleaned out his mom's apartment, he remembered the suicide of his brother in his 20s and remembered the death of his dad when he was 10. Never having dealt with any of that, it all came in one big, huge, massive, bully empire of grief and landed on him. And he couldn't get going. He had to get some help. So he decided to put some of his conversations with the counselor that he was seeing and these grief experts online. And then he started interviewing celebrities who had gone through some kind of loss and grief. Listen, just disclaimer. I know as soon as I put Anderson Cooper up there, a lot of you went, oh man, liberal CNN. Or, oh my, he's not, his lifestyle's not. I'm just saying. He experienced a lot of grief. He's got a process where he's trying to help people in it. For 3 years, he's done this podcast. So I decided that was really good. I'm just going to start listening to him. The very first episode I listened to was he interviewed Stephen Colbert, all right? And a bunch of you just went, oh, liberal, okay. Late night talk show host, right? Pretty outspoken. Guess what? Follower of Jesus. I didn't know that. So he's interviewing Colbert, and Colbert came from a Catholic family of 11 kids. When he was 10 years old, his two older brothers and his dad were killed in an airplane accident. So, Anderson Cooper had seen Colbert on another show being interviewed, and he says, Stephen, when you're on this show, I heard you say this quote, that what punishments of God are not gifts. He says, do you really believe that? That even the pain and stuff we go through come from God and we should receive them as gifts? What? And Anderson Cooper, through his tears, are how does that make sense? I'm in the middle of this thing. How can that be from God at all? And the quote was from J.R. Tolkien. And Colbert just used it. And then he says, It's a gift to exist. And with existence comes suffering. There's no escaping that, right? And then Anderson Cooper says, what makes this kind of suffering and loss a gift? Why this pain? This is really great. It's a little long. Quote, Colbert says, we've asked to accept the world that God gives us and to accept it with love. If God is everywhere and God is in everything, then the world as it is all just an expression of God and His love. Get this now. And you have to accept it with gratitude. You have to be grateful for all of it. You can't pick and choose what you're grateful for. And later in the interview, he says, listen, I don't want to get all preachy and proselytizing, but it's what God did with His Son, Jesus. And I'm like, wow. Wow. Listen, I recommend All There Is podcasts to any of you who are struggling with grief or care about people in grief. Here's what I recommend. Only listen to it while you're mowing your lawn on your riding lawnmower. Don't try to listen to it as you jog. I listened Thursday in my jog. Luke Bryant was on there, and I was listening to it. You cannot jog and cry at the same time. You just can't do it. I kept wandering off I thought I was going to go off Rocky Point. I kept wandering off in my tears. All right, let me turn the corner just real quick. Here's how I started finding a little bit of hope in the midst of this grief journey I was on. I read this quote that said that grief is like an amputation. You heal, but you're never the same. That is really true. I'm still me. I'm just me without my brother. Not the same person. But the writers of the Psalms knew about lament, knew about grief, knew about processing their sorrow out loud. In fact, there's 150 Psalms in the Bible. 50 of them are about grief and pain. They're lament psalms, we would call them. Psalm 126 says, and now, God, do it again. Like, we've been through it. Bring rains to our drought-stricken lives. So those who planted their crops in despair will shout yes at the harvest. Those who have been seeding the ground with pain, bring us to a time where we can shout and be excited. So those who went off with heavy hearts will come home laughing and armloads of blessing. Like, come on, God, you can do this. There's a process for it. There's help for this. I needed to understand that the tears you plant today will one day be a harvest of joy. And that's not Christian talk, right? Like, just get over it, praise Jesus, and let's move on. That I need to know that what I'm going through, the tears that I am experiencing, are leading to something fruitful or hopeful someday. I'm not there yet. Grief is love with no place to go. That's why it's so confining. You feel this stuff and you have nothing to do with it. You can't express it to your loved one. You can say it and you can talk to your loved one. I know my brother's with Jesus, no doubt. But he's not here. It's like it's all the love that you want to give, but you just can't. Another thing I've learned. Grief teaches dependence, which I like being in control. I have no control over. I want to control all outcomes, and I can't. And grief taught me again, listen, time doesn't heal, Jesus does. And once again, Kyle, you need to take a step back and attempt to trust that God is moving in a right direction, and you're just along for the ride sometimes. Grief awakens compassion. I wish that I knew what I know today 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago. I didn't know anything about grief. I just figured, yeah, you feel bad? I'm here. I'll bring you a meal. Let's move on. I know that's harsh. That's how I felt. That's how some of you feel. The first thing I did when I got back from the funeral in Idaho was I called up my buddy Matt. and said, let's go to lunch. And I apologized to him for how I handled his situation when he and Charlie lost their son, Zeke. I had no idea of the depth of their pain. I still don't understand it, but I'm going to walk better with them. I did a poor job. On Anderson Cooper's podcast, he was interviewing Amy Sedaris, whose sister died by suicide. And at the end of every broadcast, he says, hey, what advice would you have for people who are grieving? And she said, just assume everybody is grieving something. Then you won't miss it. Then you'll be a comfort. Jesus in shoes as you walk and process, knowing that everyone is probably grieving something. Grief is unavoidable. Can't spend much time with this example, but I love it. If you ever, old school people, middle old school people, if you played Nintendo 64, Mario World was awesome. You had to get Mario through the thing, you're going to say Princess Peach or whatever. And you play a while, and then the ghosts show up. Who's with me? Say, whoop. Yeah. The ghosts are bad, right? The ghosts, when the ghosts show up, you're like, well, if they get you, you're dead. So you better run from the ghost. And what happens when you run from the ghost? That's right, it chases you. Like, when you get into ghost land, you're supposed to sit down, wait, don't start running, and think about your next move instead of just taking off. Because if you run, they're going to get you. My buddy Brett Lamar, who's gone through his own loss and pain, had us over for dinner and said, Kyle, you got to learn how to dance with grief. I'm like, you're weird. It's not going anywhere. If you run from it, you're going to do damage to you and your relationships. You have to turn and look at it. Because when you turn and look at the ghost in Nintendo 64, it freezes. I don't know if you can dance with a ghost in Nintendo 64. But you got to get to a place that's like, yep, this bully moved in. But there's a process to make this bully your friend. And in that lament process, there's hope at the end. Grief needs to be acknowledged out loud. I'm almost done. It took me about, 6 or 7 months, and I decided to invite some of my community back in. Not intentionally, but in a series of 10 days, next slide please, in a series of 10 days, I had a meeting with my buddy Brad, whose wife was dying of cancer and now has passed. That same day, I met with our CR director, Lynette, and she said, how you doing? And for the first time, I let her know. I was super open. Both Brad and Lynette, as I sat there and cried, said, don't you think you should see somebody? I said, duh, you go see somebody. I don't want to see anybody. All right, and they're okay. So then, the next day, I go down and see the greatest naturopath doctor in the history of the world, Dr. Bridges. I go in for my annual checkup. Because I'm a walking specimen of health, she hardly ever has to do anything. All right? Has to figure out my gluten intolerance, but that's it. So I go walking in, this is same week. I go walking in, and she says, how you doing? And I cried for 40 minutes of the hour appointment. Just sobbed. And for the first time, I said, I don't want to talk to somebody. She said, don't you think you should talk to someone? I said, what do you know? You're just a doctor. She said, all right. And she didn't take no for an answer. She like, Kyle, I'm going to set you up with an appointment right now. There's someone that meets in her office, and she just got on it like she always does. From that, the next week, I go to the annual elders retreat, Real Life Elders. We get to the elders retreat, and we're all sharing and everything. And First morning we share, they get to me and they're like, no, pass. I don't want to talk. Well, later that evening, they didn't let that go by, and they came back to me and said, and I sat there and just wept. And I decided, man, I don't want to go talk to anybody, but I got to do something. So I decided I just needed to start talking. And this is what I learned. Here's the biggest lesson I've learned in 15 months. That grief begins to soften when you start talking through your tears. This bully that had moved in, when I started talking, see, you would ask me how I'm doing, and I would start crying, and I'd say, I can't talk about it. Thanks for asking, but I can't talk about it. Once I decided I'm going to keep talking, even though I'm crying and I look stupid, even though my nose is running, and I know I don't look very manly, I'm just going to keep talking. When I started talking through my tears, the power of grief started to soften up a little bit. I'm not through it by any means, y'all. But when I started talking, when people would ask, I'd let them know. Right after the elders retreat, my friend Lester called up and said, hey, I heard you're having a bad time. Maybe we should have coffee. Okay. Lester had lost his wife a couple years before. So we sat in public in the coffee shop at the community center, and we just talked. He cried, I cried. He was down the road in grief a little bit with me. I learned some stuff from him. And he said, Kyle, Lester's not yet a follower of Jesus. But he said, Kyle, through all this pain that you've been through, has it caused you to doubt your faith in God? And at this moment, I knew that I was making some progress because I just started crying. And I said, Lester, absolutely not. The goodness of God has always been my companion. To say that out loud, to get it out through my tears, it began kind of the dam to break a little bit. Just my journey. We're going to help you as much as we can find your way through grief. Next slide, please. And here's the steps we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about lament. And there's 4 steps to lament. The first step is turn. We're going to talk about that next week. You got to bring your pain to God. The second is complain. Let God have it. Like, be full expression of what's going on in your heart. The next step after that is ask. Seek healing and comfort. And finally is trust. Choose to believe God is still good. That's what lament looks like. And we're going to help you with that. Because there's going to be a point where in the middle of your grief, whatever you're going through, in the middle of my grief, your future loss and pain that's coming your way, where we can agree with David when we say, you pulled me from the brink of death, my feet from the cliff edge of doom. Now I stroll at leisure with God in the sunlit fields of life. When David wrote that, he was referring to a horrible time in his life where God came through. Well, I got 3 next steps for you. They're on the blue card. Please use the blue card for prayer requests or comments or just sign up for something. But here's 3 next steps. I'm going to go quick, but I think they're super important, and you'll see what I mean. First step, identify your own griefs or loss. You have been through it. Say it out loud. Say it out loud to somebody. Say it out loud to nobody. Say it out loud. What is it? Some of you are still grieving stuff from years and years ago that you never dealt with. No judgment. If that's not you, listen to this. Then do it as a friend. That you've got people who have gone through stuff. Go back to them and say, how are you doing with that? I'm so sorry I haven't asked you for months. What's going on? Like maybe you're not going through anything right now, but you got somebody in life who is. Go back and ask. Like, oh, I don't want to settle them. Yeah, they won't be upset. They'll be honored that you cared about their pain. And you don't have to show up and say anything. The people that show up and tell you what to do and how to think and where to read in the Bible and what to do this, they're not of any help. The people who do the best job in helping people in grief are the ones who show up and just sit with them. 2, bring your questions to God's goodness so you don't have to question God's goodness. Like stuff you don't understand, like, God, this, I know you're good. You have been with me my entire life helping me through stuff. But right now, I don't understand, and here's what's going on. And as a friend, bring your presence to people in pain. You show up. I just talked with someone 2 days ago, and I said what I say a lot. This time I mean it. I know you don't believe there's help. I know you don't have faith right now. I know that you are really struggling and you don't see any hope. But I'll believe it for the both of us till you're ready to believe it. And I have enough faith in the goodness of God that I can walk through you, and I'll carry that with you until you're ready to believe it. That's the best friend you could ever have. 3rd, choose to follow Jesus to find lasting hope. Listen, I know, man, if you're here tuning in and you're like, man, I just came for the coffee and cookies because someone invited me. I didn't know it was going to be like this. Everyone experiences pain, right? It's unavoidable. But I would just ask you to stop and think, if you're not yet a follower of Jesus, I don't want you to live through life of pain, which we all will, without the safety net of hope that Jesus brings. And it's simply, hey, Jesus, I'm lost without you. I can't save myself from my grief, but I can't save myself from my sin, from my mistakes, from my past. And I know that I'm far from you. And so God said, that's not good. So he sends Jesus, really an act of sacrifice on God the Father's part, to send his son on our behalf that paves the way to a relationship with God the Father. And if you are a follower of Jesus, I would just encourage you to walk with others as they're searching for hope. They don't need any judgment. They don't need your correction. They need an example of what it looks like to follow Jesus in a loving, hope-filled, honest way. That's it. Next week will be a little bit easier. Next month may be easier. Maybe in a few years I'll be fine. But it's okay that I'm not. In this process of grief, in this journey I'm on, I am learning so much. How to be a better husband, a better dad, a better pastor, a better friend. I wouldn't have welcomed it, but I'm thankful I'm here. I'm going to turn it back over to Brewster. Let's pray. God, thank you for Jesus. Thank you for the hope that someday everything's going to be right. Someday you're going to make it all justice. You're going to make it all good. You're going to make it pain-free. But today, we thank you that you walk through us in our pain and in our loss. God, I ask that you help us be that for other people. But I'm so grateful that you offer hope, comfort, healing today. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thank you so much for being here. Hey, listen, grab a Christmas shoebox on your way out. Participate with us, please. Have a great, great day. See ya. Love you. Bye.